Charles Smith was once a promising first-round NBA draft pick. Selected third overall by the Philadelphia 76ers in 1988, the 6'10" power forward seemed destined for a solid career. He played for the Clippers, Knicks, and Spurs, averaging over 14 points per game and becoming known for his mid-range touch and rebounding. But after retiring in 1998, Smith's life began to spiral. The fame faded, and what followed was a descent into violence and tragedy. The shocking part? It wasn't some gradual slip. It was a complete fall from grace. In 2010, headlines broke that Charles Smith had been arrested and charged with the murder of his fiancée. According to police reports, Smith shot her multiple times in a domestic altercation in Washington, D.C. The case stunned the basketball world. Here was a former Olympic gold medalist, 1988 Seoul, and respectable veteran player, now in handcuffs and facing life in prison. Smith pleaded guilty and was convicted of second-degree murder. His fall wasn't just tragic, it was horrifying. Unlike many post-retirement stories of addiction, financial trouble, or bad business decisions, Smith's legacy is now tied to something much darker: intimate partner violence that turned deadly. There's no comeback story here, no redemption arc, just a chilling reminder that sometimes the darkness inside a player can completely eclipse the glory of their career. Charles Smith's story isn't just a crime story. It's a warning that fame, talent, and success don't guarantee stability. And for some, the end of their NBA career is only the beginning of a much darker chapter. Keith Appling once lit up college basketball as the star point guard for Michigan State. He was quick, crafty, and a born leader on the floor. After going undrafted in 2014, he briefly made it to the NBA with the Orlando Magic, bouncing between short contracts and G League stints. He wasn't a household name, but those who followed college hoops knew his potential. Then everything fell apart. After his basketball career fizzled out, Appling's life took a dark and dangerous turn. He was arrested multiple times post-NBA for gun possession and drug-related charges. But the worst came in 2021. Appling was arrested and charged with second-degree murder for shooting and killing a 66-year-old man in Detroit. The motive? An argument over a weapon. The case shocked fans who remembered him as the disciplined floor general from his Michigan State days. Prosecutors laid out a disturbing pattern. Appling had spiraled into criminal behavior, becoming involved in illegal weapon sales and violent incidents. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to 18 to 40 years in prison. What makes Appling's story especially tragic is how far he fell and how fast. He went from a Final Four appearance to a prison cell before even turning 30. No massive contract, no fame to cushion the fall, just a long, sad descent into crime. Keith Appling isn't just a cautionary tale. He's a real-life example of how life after basketball can go horribly wrong without support, structure, or purpose. His story isn't about a superstar gone rogue. It's about how even role players can face demons that fame alone can't cure. Michael Niles had a brief, almost forgettable career in the NBA. Drafted in 1979 by the Philadelphia 76ers, he ended up playing just 44 games for the Phoenix Suns during the 1980-81 season. On the court, his stats were unremarkable, but it's what happened off the court that would make his name infamous. After his basketball career ended, Niles struggled to find direction. In 1989, he made national headlines for all the wrong reasons. He was charged and later convicted of attempted murder after shooting his estranged wife in front of their daughter. The crime was brutal. He reportedly fired multiple shots, one of which hit her in the chest. His wife survived, but the incident left permanent physical and emotional scars, not just for her, but for the entire family. Niles was sentenced to 9 years in prison, and any hope of rebuilding a quiet post-NBA life vanished in that moment. What shocked many was the contrast. A man who had made it to the NBA, however briefly, descending into extreme violence. His case never got the media attention of bigger stars, but it remains one of the darker tales in league history. It's a reminder that not every player transitions smoothly into life after basketball. Michael Niles serves as a chilling example of how quickly things can unravel. From professional athlete to convicted felon, His fall from grace wasn't slow. It was explosive, violent, and irreversible. And while his NBA stint might be forgotten, his crimes are not. Jason Williams wasn't just another NBA player. He was a towering presence for the New Jersey Nets, known for his rebounding and shot blocking. A former first-round pick in the 1990 draft, he had a solid, though not superstar, career. But after retirement, Williams made headlines for something far more disturbing than anything he did on the court. In 2002, tragedy struck when Williams accidentally shot and killed his limousine driver, Kostas Gus Christofi, inside his New Jersey mansion. According to reports, Williams was showing off a shotgun during a tour of his house when it discharged, striking Christofi in the chest and killing him instantly. The story was bizarre and disturbing, and it only got darker. Williams didn't immediately call the police. Instead, he tried to cover it up. He had his friends clean up the scene, and he allegedly attempted to make the death look like a suicide. This mishandling of the situation led to a slew of legal problems. After years of trials, delays, and emotional testimony, Jason Williams was convicted of aggravated assault and later pleaded guilty to attempted cover-up charges. He was sentenced in 2010 and served about 18 months in prison. What made it all more tragic was the senselessness of it. A man lost his life in an avoidable accident, and Williams' actions after the fact showed a shocking lack of responsibility. His post-prison life has been marked by attempts to rehabilitate his image, but for many, the damage was done. Jason Williams went from NBA veteran to convicted felon, not because of rage or malice, but because of recklessness, poor decisions, and a refusal to immediately take accountability for a fatal mistake. Javikas Kittton had all the tools to succeed. Drafted in the first round of the 2007 NBA draft by the Los Angeles Lakers, he was a talented point guard with size, speed, and promise. But while his on-court career never quite took off, it was his life off the court that took a deeply tragic and criminal turn. After short stints with the Lakers, Grizzlies, and Wizards, Kittton faded out of the league by 2009. But what came next shocked the sports world. In 2011, Kittton was charged with murder for the shooting death of 22-year-old Julian Jones, a mother of 4 in Atlanta. Authorities believed she was an innocent bystander. Kittton was allegedly targeting a rival gang member in a retaliation shooting. What's more disturbing is the alleged gang affiliation. Reports indicated that Kittton had ties to the Crips and became more involved in criminal activity after his NBA career ended. That same year, he was also indicted on federal drug trafficking charges, further cementing his descent into crime. In 2015, Kittton pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter with a weapon and aggravated assault with a firearm. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison, a shocking fall from grace for a former first-round pick. Once seen as a bright young star, Kittton's story became a cautionary tale of how poor choices and dangerous associations can completely derail a life. His name now sits among the most tragic what-ifs in NBA history, not for injuries or missed potential, but for the life he chose after basketball. Richard Adams isn't a name most NBA fans would recognize. He never became a star. In fact, his professional basketball career was short-lived and largely unremarkable. But what makes his story so chilling is what happened long after the spotlight faded, a disturbing descent into violence that most sports media barely even covered. Adams had a brief stint in pro basketball during the 1970s. He bounced between leagues and never really made an impact on the court. He was the kind of player whose name would have disappeared into history quietly until his criminal record emerged. Years after his playing days were over, Adams became known for his involvement in a string of violent crimes, including assault and armed robbery. According to public records and scattered reports, Adams was arrested multiple times in the 1980s and 1990s. He developed a reputation as someone with a volatile temper, and his violent outbursts became more frequent and dangerous. What makes Adams's case so different is how little attention it received. Unlike high-profile players whose scandals dominate headlines, Adams' fall went mostly unnoticed. There was no media frenzy, no ESPN coverage, just a slow unraveling of a man whose life drifted far from the game he once played. His final known arrest was for a brutal assault that left his victim hospitalized. While the full extent of his criminal history remains murky due to limited documentation, the pattern is clear. Richard Adams went from a forgotten athlete to a dangerous and troubled individual. Today, his name isn't found in highlight reels or record books, but in criminal databases and faded mugshots. A quiet cautionary tale of obscurity, violence, and wasted potential. Ty Lawson was once one of the NBA's fastest point guards, a lightning-quick floor general who helped lead the Denver Nuggets to playoff contention year after year. A standout at North Carolina and a solid pro, Lawson looked like he had all the tools to enjoy a long, respected career. But after the final buzzer sounded on his NBA days, his life started to unravel. What followed was a pattern of arrests and reckless behavior, most notably a string of DUI charges across multiple states. From Colorado to California to Washington, D.C., Lawson was arrested at least 4 times for driving under the influence. Each time, the headlines felt more tragic than shocking. Another former star unable to leave the past behind. The most disturbing part wasn't just the repeated DUIs. It was the lack of change. Despite court-ordered alcohol education, rehab stints, and probation periods, Lawson continued to make the same mistakes. His off-court troubles slowly pushed him out of the league as teams became unwilling to take the risk. By 2017, his time in the NBA was over. He bounced around overseas teams in China and Europe, but the headlines always followed him. Another arrest, another warning sign. Fans who once cheered for his explosiveness on the court now watched him implode off of it. Lawson never committed a violent crime, but his actions put lives in danger, time and time again. His story is one of wasted potential and personal demons left unchecked. A stark reminder that talent alone isn't enough to outrun the consequences of self-destruction. Ty Lawson didn't just lose his career, he lost control. And once the NBA faded away, there was nothing left to keep him grounded. J.R. Smith's NBA career was as unpredictable as his life off the court. A gifted scorer with highlight reel dunks and an undeniable swagger, Smith won 2 NBA championships and played alongside legends like LeBron James. But behind the three-pointers and tattoos was a man constantly caught in the wrong kind of spotlight. One of the darkest moments in Smith's life came in 2007 when he was involved in a fatal car accident in New Jersey. Smith, driving a rented SUV, ran a stop sign and collided with another vehicle. His best friend, Andre Bell, was ejected from the car and died from his injuries. Smith wasn't under the influence, but the crash was caused by reckless driving. He was speeding and failed to yield. In 2009, he was sentenced to 90 days in jail and served 24. But the trouble didn't stop there. Over the years, JR racked up multiple arrests, including for driving without a valid license, involvement in bar altercations, and traffic violations. While he was never charged with violent crime, his name became synonymous with poor judgment and chaos. Fines, suspensions, and bad press followed him like a shadow throughout his career. Despite the scandals, Smith somehow kept getting chances, thanks to his raw talent and connections with superstars. But many fans never forgot the off-court damage, especially the fatal crash that took a life far too soon. J.R. Smith is a case of unrealized maturity, a man who couldn't escape his own recklessness until it was too late. He eventually found redemption later in life, returning to college and playing collegiate golf. But the past still lingers. Some players fall from greatness, others crash through it. Clifford Rosier was once a promising NBA big man. Drafted 16th overall in the 1994 NBA draft by the Golden State Warriors, Rosier had all the physical tools, 6'11", strong, with a dominant college career at Louisville. He even made the NBA All-Rookie second team. But his professional career was short-lived, and what came after was far darker than anyone expected. After just a few seasons bouncing between the Warriors and the Timberwolves, Rozier's NBA run ended quietly. Injuries and inconsistency pushed him out of the league, and with the spotlight gone, he fell into a downward spiral. What began as a quiet fade from basketball became a full-blown collapse. He struggled with drug addiction, financial troubles, and mental health issues, living a life far removed from the hardwood. By the early 2000s, Rosier was in and out of jail for drug-related offenses and burglary charges. His name barely made headlines anymore. Once known for battling NBA stars in the paint, he was now just another cautionary tale of wasted talent. His struggles were not just legal, they were deeply personal. In interviews, Rosier spoke openly about being homeless, dealing with depression, and feeling abandoned by the basketball world. Despite brief attempts at recovery and mentoring others, he could never fully reclaim control of his life. Clifford Rosier died in 2018 of a heart attack at just 45 years old. Few headlines marked his passing, but for those who remembered his early promise, his story remains a heartbreaking reminder. Talent means nothing without support, stability, and direction. Rosier's fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, painful, and mostly ignored. Roy Tarpley wasn't just talented, he was special. A 7-footer with a silky touch and dominant rebounding instincts, Tarpley was drafted 7th overall by the Dallas Mavericks in 1986. By his second season, he was already averaging a double-double and won the NBA 6th Man of the Year award in 1988. He was supposed to be the franchise cornerstone, but instead of rising, he collapsed. Tarpley's downfall wasn't due to injury or lack of skill. It was addiction. Alcohol and cocaine plagued his life from the start. He was first suspended by the NBA in 1989 for substance abuse, and over the next few years, his issues only worsened. Multiple violations of the NBA's drug policy led to an eventual lifetime ban in 1995. Despite brief comebacks overseas and in lower leagues, he never regained the form or the life he once had. But it didn't stop there. Tarpley's post-NBA life was marked by legal troubles, including arrests for DUI and domestic violence. In one particularly disturbing case, he was charged with assaulting his girlfriend. He bounced between rehab, jail, and failed business ventures. The man who once looked like a future all-star was now a tragic figure battling demons far bigger than basketball. Tarpley later sued the NBA for violating the Americans with Disabilities Act, arguing that his addiction was a medical condition, not a personal failure. The case was quietly settled. In 2015, Roy Tarpley died at age 50 from liver failure. It was the final chapter of a story that should have been about greatness, not tragedy. His life stands as one of the clearest examples of how quickly potential can be destroyed by addiction, and how little the system did to save him when it mattered most. At his peak, Steve Francis was the face of the Houston Rockets. Known as the franchise, he was explosive, athletic, and electric on the court. Drafted 2nd overall in 1999, he was a 3-time All-Star and one of the most exciting point guards of the early 2000s. But once the bright lights of the NBA dimmed, Francis's life took a sharp and tragic turn. After retiring in 2008, his public appearances became increasingly erratic. The man once known for his confidence and swagger looked lost. Behind the scenes, he was battling alcohol addiction, drug abuse, and a deep sense of identity loss. Without the structure and purpose that basketball provided, Francis spiraled. He was arrested in 2016 for drunken driving in Houston. Just days later, he turned himself in for a burglary charge in Florida, accused of breaking into a stranger's car and stealing valuables. And it wasn't just a one-time slip. His name began appearing more and more in police reports, often tied to drug possession, theft, and disorderly conduct. What shocked fans wasn't just the fall, it was how fast and how far it went. Francis had been the guy who fought through personal tragedy and a tough upbringing to reach NBA stardom. He was supposed to be a success story. Instead, he became a cautionary tale. In rare interviews, Francis has admitted he struggled with depression, the loss of his stepfather, and the pressure of life post-NBA. He's tried to rebuild, launching charitable efforts and speaking on his challenges. But the damage to his reputation and legacy was already done. Steve Francis didn't just fall from grace, he crashed. His story is a reminder that fame and money can't always save you from what's waiting when the game ends. Reggie Harding holds a unique place in NBA history. In 1962, he became the first player ever drafted straight out of high school, a towering 7-footer with raw talent and limitless potential. The Detroit Pistons believed they were getting a generational big man. But behind the scenes, Harding was already battling demons that would eventually consume him. Because NBA rules at the time didn't allow players to join the league straight from high school, Harding had to wait a year after being drafted before making his debut in 1963. When he finally stepped onto the court, he showed flashes of brilliance, averaging 11 points and nearly 10 rebounds per game in his rookie season. But his off-court behavior quickly overshadowed any promise he showed on the hardwood. Harding's NBA career was derailed by multiple arrests, including charges of assault, drug possession, and robbery. He was known for his volatility, and his behavior became increasingly unpredictable. His once bright future spiraled into a life of crime. He spent time in and out of prison, often making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Perhaps the most infamous story about Harding came when he allegedly attempted to rob a gas station while wearing a ski mask, only to be recognized by the clerk due to his 7-foot frame and unmistakable voice. In 1972, at just 30 years old, Reggie Harding's life came to a violent end when he was shot and killed on the streets of Detroit. The man who broke barriers as a high school draftee died not as a basketball legend, but as a tragic cautionary tale. Harding's story isn't just about wasted talent. It's about how opportunity, without discipline or support, can lead even pioneers down the darkest roads. Before he changed his name to Meta World Peace, Ron Artest was known as one of the NBA's most volatile and unpredictable players. Talented, tough, and tenacious on defense, Artest had the tools to be a perennial all-star. But it wasn't his game that made headlines. It was his temper. The defining moment of Artest's career, and one of the darkest in NBA history, came on November 19, 2004. During a game between the Indiana Pacers and Detroit Pistons, a hard foul between Artest and Ben Wallace escalated into a full-blown brawl between players and fans. What began on the court spilled into the stands, where Artest famously charged into the crowd and punched a fan, believing he had thrown a drink at him. The incident, known as the Malice at the Palace, led to one of the longest suspensions in NBA history. Artest was suspended for the rest of the season, 86 games, including playoffs. It wasn't just a punishment for fighting, but for shattering the fragile boundary between athletes and the crowd. Off the court, Artest had a reputation for erratic behavior, from applying for a job at Circuit City during his rookie season to publicly clashing with teammates and coaches. Yet, behind the chaos was a man dealing with serious mental health issues, which he later addressed openly. In later years, Artest tried to rewrite his narrative. He legally changed his name, won a title with the Lakers in 2010, and publicly advocated for mental health awareness. But no matter how much peace he tried to promote, Ron Artest will always be remembered first for the night he turned an NBA arena into a war zone. Shaun Kemp was once one of the most electrifying players in the NBA. A 6-time All-Star and the heart of the 1990s Seattle Supersonics, Kemp was known for his explosive dunks, relentless energy, and highlight reel plays. But post-retirement, the man once called the Rain Man has made headlines for all the wrong reasons. In March 2023, Shaun Kemp was arrested in Tacoma, Washington, in connection with an alleged drive-by shooting. According to reports, Kemp claimed he was trying to recover stolen property, specifically a cell phone, and that he fired his weapon in self-defense. Security footage and early police reports, however, painted a murkier picture, and the incident sparked massive media attention due to Kemp's celebrity status. While no one was seriously injured and Kemp wasn't ultimately charged, the shock of seeing a former NBA superstar associated with gunfire in a public place left fans stunned. It wasn't Kemp's first run-in with the law either. He had multiple drug-related arrests in the early 2000s, including marijuana and cocaine possession. Kemp's post-basketball life has been complicated. Though he made attempts to stay connected to the sport through coaching, media appearances, and even launching a cannabis dispensary in Seattle, these flashes of entrepreneurship have often been overshadowed by legal issues and controversy. Once considered one of the most exciting young stars in the league, Kemp's name now lives in a strange space, fondly remembered by NBA fans for his on-court brilliance, but frequently resurfacing in headlines for off-court trouble. For many, the drive-by incident was the latest reminder that not all NBA legends ride off into the sunset. Allen Iverson was more than an NBA star. He was a cultural revolution. Known for his fearless crossover, cornrows, tattoos, and unapologetic attitude, Iverson changed how basketball looked and felt. But long before he became a league MVP, his life nearly collapsed before it ever took off. In 1993, at just 17 years old, Iverson was arrested and convicted in a racially charged brawl at a bowling alley in Hampton, Virginia. Though no video clearly showed his involvement, Iverson, the only high-profile black teen involved, received a 15-year sentence, with 10 suspended. The case divided the community and spotlighted deep racial tensions. After serving 4 months, he was granted clemency by the governor, but the damage to his reputation lingered. Once in the NBA, Iverson was electric. He led the Sixers to the 2001 Finals, won MVP, and influenced a generation of players and fans. Yet off the court, troubles followed. His post-NBA life was marked by public breakdowns, financial troubles, custody battles, and rumors of alcohol abuse. At times, there were concerns he was homeless or completely broke, despite earning over $200 million in career earnings and endorsements. While Iverson later found support through friends and the NBA community, his story remains a haunting example of what happens when fame and trauma collide. He wasn't evil, far from it, but he was surrounded by chaos, often struggling to find peace. His early life was shaped by injustice, his later years by personal demons. For all his talent and legacy, Iverson's journey is a reminder that greatness doesn't guarantee stability, and not all legends find their footing once the final buzzer sounds. Delonte West's downfall is one of the most heartbreaking stories in NBA history. A former first-round pick and key role player for teams like the Celtics, Cavaliers, and Mavericks, West once shared the court with LeBron James and guarded the league's best. But after his NBA days ended, his life spiraled out of control in full public view. West was always open about his battles with bipolar disorder, which he was diagnosed with during his playing career. He tried to manage it, but the pressures of the NBA, personal struggles, and later financial instability made things worse. After leaving the league in 2012, things unraveled fast. Over the years, disturbing images and videos began surfacing online. Delonte wandering the streets, getting into fights, and looking completely unrecognizable. At one point, he was seen begging on the side of a Dallas highway, sparking national concern. Despite multiple arrests, including for public intoxication, resisting arrest, and trespassing, fans and former teammates still hoped for a turnaround. In 2020, Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban personally picked him up at a gas station and helped get him into rehab. There were brief glimpses of hope. West was seen working at a rehab facility, trying to rebuild. But relapse came quickly. As of 2023, more arrest records and tragic photos painted the same bleak picture. Delonte West was still struggling. West's story isn't about evil, it's about how mental illness and addiction can destroy even the most talented. He went from guarding NBA superstars to fighting for his life in the streets. His tale is a brutal reminder that athletes are human, and without support, even fame and fortune can disappear in an instant. Donald Sterling wasn't an NBA player, but as the longtime owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, his name is forever tied to one of the darkest chapters in league history. For decades, whispers of his racist behavior circled behind closed doors. But it wasn't until 2014 that the whole world heard exactly who he really was. An audio recording surfaced of Sterling speaking to his then-girlfriend, V. Stiviano, berating her for associating with black people and bringing them to Clippers games, including Magic Johnson. His comments weren't subtle or coded. They were aggressively racist, tone-deaf, and arrogant. The backlash was immediate and nuclear. NBA players, coaches, fans, and even corporate sponsors demanded action. The league, under new commissioner Adam Silver, responded swiftly and forcefully. Within days, Sterling was banned for life from the NBA and fined $2.5 million, the maximum allowed. He was also forced to sell the Clippers, which were eventually bought by Steve Ballmer for $2 billion. But the scandal didn't end there. After the ban, multiple reports detailed Sterling's long history of racist housing practices as a landlord, sexist comments, and toxic workplace behavior. Employees described him as vulgar, erratic, and obsessed with power. He had been sued for housing discrimination multiple times before, with shocking evidence of him refusing to rent to Black and Latino tenants. Mark Cuban has always been one of the NBA's most vocal and visible owners. Charismatic, media-savvy, and passionate about his team, the Dallas Mavericks, he seemed like the model of a modern sports executive. But behind the Mavericks' flashy exterior, a deeply disturbing workplace culture festered for years. In 2018, a shocking report by Sports Illustrated exposed a pattern of widespread sexual harassment and misconduct within the Mavericks' front office. Employees described a corporate culture rife with misogyny and predatory behavior, including years of abuse by former CEO Terdema Usuri, who had already been accused of similar misconduct in the past. The allegations were graphic: inappropriate comments, unwanted touching, and a general sense of fear among female employees. Even worse, it appeared the Mavericks' leadership did nothing to stop it. The organization had protected Usuri and others, allowing the toxic behavior to continue unchecked. Though Cuban wasn't directly accused of harassment, the scandal severely damaged his reputation. Critics slammed him for turning a blind eye, especially as the team's owner and public face. Cuban later admitted he was unaware, but took full responsibility for the environment. He pledged to overhaul the organization and donated $10 million to women's causes. An independent investigation confirmed a 15-year pattern of misconduct, forcing Cuban to take drastic action. He hired new leadership, implemented stronger HR protocols, and promised accountability moving forward. But the damage had been done. The scandal was a stark reminder. Even in progressive, media-friendly franchises, power can protect predators, and silence can be just as dangerous. The Mavericks' success on the court was built on dysfunction behind the scenes, and for many of the women involved, no donation could undo the years of fear and humiliation they endured. Dennis Rodman was never normal, and he never pretended to be. On the court, he was a rebounding machine, a defensive wall, and one of the most unpredictable players the NBA had ever seen. But his post-retirement life? Even wilder. After leaving basketball, Rodman went from flamboyant celebrity to full-blown international mystery. Tabloids followed him for his wild outfits, piercings, drinking problems, and unpredictable stunts. But in 2013, he made headlines for something even stranger, becoming friends with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Yes, Dennis Rodman somehow became the first American to hang out with Kim, calling him a friend for life. He made several visits to North Korea, attended exhibitions, and even sang happy birthday to the supreme leader in front of a crowd of thousands. The world was stunned. Critics accused Rodman of normalizing a brutal regime known for labor camps, executions, and censorship. Rodman, however, insisted it was about basketball and peace. He claimed he was trying to bridge gaps between nations through sport. But during a CNN interview, he went on a slurred, confusing rant, prompting concerns about his sobriety and judgment. Rodman's post-NBA life has been a mix of rehab stints, arrests for domestic violence and DUI, and bizarre diplomatic detours. His unpredictable behavior has made him more of a tabloid spectacle than a sports icon. While some view him as a misunderstood figure with good intentions, others see him as a troubled man chasing attention in the most dangerous places. Either way, Dennis Rodman's legacy is unlike anyone else's, a Hall of Famer who swapped championship rings for visits to one of the world's most repressive regimes. And the craziest part? He still calls it one of the proudest accomplishments of his life. Gilbert Arena was once one of the most electrifying guards in the NBA, an all-star, a 29 points per game scorer, and the heart of the Washington Wizards. Nicknamed Agent Zero, he was flashy, fearless, and funny. But that all changed in 2009 when Arena made a mistake so reckless, it torpedoed his career. The story was almost unbelievable. After a dispute over a gambling debt with teammate Javikas Kittton, Arena brought 4 unloaded guns into the Wizards' locker room. Not in a bag, not hidden. He laid them out like a display in front of Kitton's locker, reportedly saying, "Pick one." Kittton allegedly responded by pulling his own loaded gun. The incident became national news. The NBA, already trying to distance itself from violent stereotypes, was forced to act fast. Arenas was suspended indefinitely, later for the remainder of the season, by Commissioner David Stern. The Wizards voided much of his contract, and Arena's image went from superstar to cautionary tale almost overnight. He eventually pled guilty to a felony gun charge and was sentenced to 30 days in a halfway house, along with community service and probation. His career never recovered. He had brief stints with the Magic and Grizzlies, but was never the same player again. Beyond the locker room incident, Arenas had other run-ins with the law, including illegal fireworks possession and public rants on social media that didn't help his already damaged image. Gilbert Arenas went from NBA icon to scandal magnate in record time. His story is a harsh reminder of how quickly a career can collapse, not from injuries, but from decisions made off the court. What could have been a Hall of Fame legacy became one of the NBA's most infamous cautionary tales. Chris "Birdman" Anderson was always one of the NBA's most colorful characters, literally. Known for his tattoos, mohawk, and high-energy style of play, he carved out a long career as a fan favorite and key role player, even winning a championship with the Miami Heat in 2013. But in 2012, his world nearly collapsed overnight. Anderson's Colorado home was raided by law enforcement as part of an investigation into alleged possession of child pornography and improper contact with a minor. The news spread instantly, and the headlines were devastating. The NBA distanced itself, and the Denver Nuggets dismissed him from team activities. Social media and the press exploded with speculation, and for a time, it looked like Birdman might never play again. But as the investigation unfolded, the truth was far more complicated and disturbing in a different way. Anderson had been catfished. A Canadian woman named Shelley Chartier had created fake online personas to manipulate and deceive both Anderson and the underage girl involved, forging conversations between them and setting up a trap that misled law enforcement. Eventually, Anderson was fully cleared of all wrongdoing, and the charges were dropped. He returned to the league, signing with the Miami Heat and playing a valuable role in their 2013 championship run. Though vindicated, the damage to his reputation lingered. The scandal became part of his narrative, even if he was the victim. Chris Anderson's case is a rare one, a player falsely accused, caught in a web of lies beyond his control. Though he bounced back professionally, the emotional toll was real. For a man known for wild energy and big blocks, this off-court nightmare nearly erased his legacy. Derrick Rose's story was once defined by triumph and tragedy on the court. The youngest MVP in NBA history, he electrified fans with his explosive athleticism and humble attitude. But in 2016, that narrative was shaken by a civil lawsuit accusing Rose of participating in a gang rape alongside two friends. The case didn't involve criminal charges, but the civil trial captured national attention. A woman, identified only as Jane Doe, alleged that Rose and his associates broke into her apartment and assaulted her while she was incapacitated. Rose insisted the encounter was consensual and that he was being extorted. The trial was graphic and chaotic. Text messages were examined. Rose admitted under oath that he didn't understand the definition of consent. His defense didn't focus on refuting the sex occurred, but rather on proving that the woman had invited them and consented. The public reaction was divisive. Some saw the case as evidence of another star abusing power. Others saw it as a messy relationship turned legal. After intense testimony, the jury found Rose not liable in October 2016. He walked out of court smiling, his career intact, but his public image wasn't. Sponsors distanced themselves. Fans argued on social media. Even though he was acquitted, the case left a permanent stain on his legacy. Rose would go on to play for multiple teams: Cleveland, Minnesota, Detroit, and New York, earning praise for his professionalism and perseverance. Yet, no matter how well he played, the civil trial still follows him in conversations about his career and character. Derrick Rose wasn't convicted, he wasn't banned, but the scandal made sure that his story would never be told without a dark asterisk next to it. These stories remind us that the game can end, but the choices we make after can define us forever. If you want more unbelievable NBA tales, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. And if you think you've heard of an even wilder post-retirement story, drop it in the comments. We might just cover it next.